Hi, thanks for taking the time to tune into today's video webcast. Today I'm primarily going to be focusing on the topic of negotiations. We know not everybody has the ability to actually attend a negotiation session, and since it's been about a month and a half since we've had any new information come out, at least in this format, we wanted to take an opportunity to do so and kind of let you know where we are in the process and where we are going forward. On a personal note though, I would like to thank those of you who have actually attended negotiations. We know you had to alter your personal schedules, and the locals team appreciate you doing so. We're encouraged by you guys coming out and certainly hope that this trend continues going forward, especially in light of the fact that we're about midway through the time frame before the contract expires on September 30th, and we have essentially dispensed with over 50% of the low-hanging fruit, as I've referred to in the past, the articles that most of you probably don't find so as interesting and or believe that they probably impact you as greatly as some of the other ones do. And which leaves us with those more significant articles, and those articles that may be inclusive of wages, benefits, incentives, promotions, those kind of things like that. We are essentially dealing with now and going forward. Those are what's left outstanding. I think right now it's about 21 articles. So through this process, we are beginning to kind of peck away at those, and have actually started that with the county over the last couple sessions. 3 articles that would probably be classified under that category, if you will, would be tour duty, shift exchange, and promotions. Now, we received a proposal for promotions from the county probably about a month ago, maybe a little over a month ago, which we summarily dismissed. However, we took the article and we wanted to at least look at some of the considerations in there, or proposals, and then at least provide some counter offer on that. In the last session the session before last, we have received a proposal from the county on tour duty and shift exchange. Now, they've taken those 2 articles and kind of stuck them together and made like a package deal out of them. And so, from their point of view, what happens in one will kind of affect the other, and vice versa. Of course, we differ with that perspective. But that all being said, their proposal provided that the shift exchange article would remain the same, and that the tour duty article would change in so much that the time at work required would be increased up to about 75%, with sweat hours having to be folded into that calculation. So it kind of significantly changes the dynamics of our article and the variables therein. And our first blush response was that we're very happy with what we have, and but certainly consider anything going forward. But that's where we are with that. And like I said, those 2 articles are married together, which brings us to essentially the promotional article, where you probably say it's probably near and dear to everyone as they kind of look at it from an individual perspective. I could say this: over the last 19 years that I've been dealing with negotiations and being involved in these processes, and that is probably the most controversial article there is. Most people look at it from a perspective of how it affects them, and that's where I guess their self-interest seem to probably prevail more so than what they worry about someone else. Understandably, but not always are one person's objectives going to run along with someone else's. So to that end, though, this is why President Ryan put together the Promotional Article Committee, to kind of collect a broad spectrum of ideas and perspectives on that subject matter. The committee they met for several months, and they came up with a great many proposals, and then provided those to the locals negotiation team. Now, we took those proposals along with what we received from the county, which once again we weren't too happy with, or happy with at all, I should say, and spent probably about 4 full days here at the office going over those proposals from the committee and trying to fold those into the current language we have, and along with that discussing amongst ourselves how the impact will be across the body and as a whole, looking at it from a historical perspective of where we've been in the past, where we are now, where we're going in the future, which I think we have a responsibility to do, from a leader's position, and especially as a member of this department, and wanting to ensure that going forward we have the best possible candidates for any possible position. So, taking all that into account, we came up with some ideas and some language, and provided a counter proposal to the county for promotions. We know that we have heard some stuff out there from some of the people who have attended the session where we discussed this at great length here in our last week or so, and we know that there was a lot of discussion regarding the county's proposal when that first came out there in the streets. So we essentially met with the county and have finally come up with what we believe is a fairly decent agreement, and it is a wholesale overhaul of the article. And we have, both the county and the local, made a tentative agreement with each other to include those changes and take into consideration a lot of those proposals that came from the committee. On some occasions, some of the committee's proposals and the county's proposals, aka Chief Jones, married together on very few occasions, but there were a few. But overall, we took what the county, we took what the county wanted and dispensed with it, and kind of brought the committee's proposals in, along with some stuff that we as officers have been dealing with for years, and kind of folding those some of those little nuances in there. If we're going to make a change, we're going to make a change across the board. So we took into consideration the standardization of some of the competencies that are out there, certainly the significance of historical experience. We also talked about, as far as our discussions, departmental demographics, the evolution of educational opportunities that now exist that maybe didn't exist in the past when we had some of these changes that were proposed, and the overall importance of education, whether it be for a particular position or as we look towards the future of our department and how we see people moving up, not just through the ranks of firefighter, battalion chief, but from battalion chief to the office level. We want to make sure that those people that are going in there have pretty much been provided the pedigree that they need to do so. One consideration to think about, though, is that this is the first real overhaul of this article in 10 years, and we are of the belief that this will provide a strong, solid foundation for the standards that we want to set forth going forward for our department. So I can report that we do have a tentative agreement. We did sign on it, and the details will certainly come out to you in written format, but I want to provide some details to each of you so that you have an idea of what actually was discussed, as opposed to what you may have heard through conjecture rhetoric again, and the telegraph telefirefighter hotline out there. We know how that can sometimes dissuade things from being from factual, if you will. So I got some notes in front of me I'm going to refer to. Let me look down at these, and as I go through, I can certainly talk about them. First thing is that I wanted to kind of hit some general things that would affect the article in general. We didn't mess with the scoring matrix at all for the written option portion. So if there's a percentage assigned to a particular grouping of variables, it stayed the same. If it's 10%, it's 10%. It's 50%, it's 50%, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever those percentages are, that has not changed. So maybe the only things that may have changed were some of the factors that go into those aggregate calculations. So, which I'll get into discussion further down. But what we did look at was looking at assessments, and essentially when assessments were being used, we devalued some things and we overvalued, if you will, some other things. So when you go from the written to the assessment, everything changed. So what we wanted to do was kind of standardize that again. We brought everything into one particular percentage, if you will, so that it's across the board the same, so that when you went from one to the other, your numbers didn't change in so much, other than the fact that your test score might change. The other thing that, as far as a general across the board that will affect everybody, is that there's going to be a 2-year period before this is implemented. So let's say best case scenario, we vote on everything, and in August, in September, boom, we get it done before the expiration. October 1, it starts a new contract. We move forward, and it's a 3-year deal. That being the case, these changes won't be implemented until October 1, 2019, which is kind of crazy for me to think about, but 2019, that will be. So we wanted to kind of let the changes, if you will, marinate on everybody, and then give people an opportunity to kind of do a little self-assessment as where they will be in the process, and to give them that same opportunity to make any personal adjustments. So we think that the 2-year period between, if we start on October 1, 2017 moving forward, will give everybody that opportunity to make those changes. So those are kind of the more general things. As we get to the specifics within, there are a couple things, if you will, along the requirements. If in the past we've had the requirements for any one of the classifications, be it lieutenant, driver, captain, battalion chief, even instructor and training officer, and inspector, that what we've done is we've taken those the education component of that, and we wanted to standardize it. If you go to college, you might find that one class is called something different than another class. So what we wanted to do was say that the class either needs to be the same curriculum as the Florida State Fire College class, or you can take the Florida State Fire College classes there. So essentially what we've narrowed it down to say, for example, like a captain would be that you need the Fire Officer curriculum, Fire Officer 1 curriculum, to become a captain. Now, essentially that brings in all the same classes, but it also provides a standardized way of us just saying, this, whatever the state is what we're going to do. If the state changes, then we would change, of course. And it doesn't lock us into one particular thing if a class doesn't exist anymore, such as in the area operations, or some of these other classes that have come and gone. Same thing with like battalion chief. You were going to need a Fire Officer 2 class to get that, or the classes. So as those things come along and change, we would kind of adjust with that. We also took an opportunity to kind of, if you look at one part of the article, you talk about acting times over here, and then you kind of go through and it talks about all kinds of other stuff, and then all of a sudden acting time comes over here as calculations. And so we kind of took those little components and stuck them all in one. So if you look at acting times, everything about acting time is going to be under here, everything about one section, and then everything about seniority is going to be under one section, everything about education is going to be under one section, and then written under one test option, and so on and so forth. So you don't have to jump around to find how this is calculated and how that's calculated. So we did take that opportunity to kind of mix those things up and move them around so that hopefully it seems to flow a little better, but we'll see how that ends up working out when people start looking at it and getting feedback from that. What we did as well is take the acting out of class in seniority for candidates and provide them credit for time from their eligibility. So essentially, when you get seniority, rather than getting that you'll get that first year or whatever months from. It's basically calculated on a monthly basis. So from the date you're hired and going forward, and then basically we're using September 30th of every year as the cutoff date or whatnot, because that's what our calculations have always been in the past. So going forward, you'd have so many months plus then years and years and years going forward, and getting a certain value for that. Same thing with acting. So that those acting in December, who get checked off in December, would actually have a little more time than an individual who was acting or checked off for acting in April. And that way no one's getting credit for a full year and moving forward. And then that also provides just that tiny bit of separation over time and giving that some of that movement we're trying to look for, where everything's not solely based on test scores, but also that where the guy or gal who has been doing a little longer gets a little extra. So this is actually in direct response to the membership's direction that we've heard over meetings over the last year or so, or a year and a half, and we believe we got a way to do it, and the county actually was very open to doing it as well. Now, the educational component has changed quite a bit, actually, in so much that there's different ways to get points for that. The maximums haven't changed, and when you look at the when you look at the promotional lists, you'll notice that everybody has 90 hours, or not everybody, but on the driver's list, 90% of the people have the 90 hours. On the captain's list, 90% of the people have the 120 hours, et cetera, et cetera. So your separation is not coming through education. That ends up being a non-factor. Only there's a few people at the bottom, if you will, if we're ranking from top to bottom as it relates to education, that if it was a non-factor, they would move in the process. So what we're looking to do is add extra little pieces into that to provide a little extra, movement one way or the other. The goal, once again, is to provide separation and give people credit for the things that they have accomplished, and certainly for moving forward through the department, how they can certainly provide that different component to their job, whether it be as a captain or whether it be as a battalion chief, or once again moving through the ranks. So we have essentially provided that there's going to be additional points offered for candidates who have degrees. So if you have a degree and degrees will be limited to a few target areas or study areas, but there will be a caveat to allow for a degree that may not be covered under the target areas that would have to be agreed upon by labor management. But if you have an associate's, either a bachelor's or master's, there'll be points assigned to each, and you can only receive points for the highest degree you may have. So you can't get points for a bachelor's and associates, or a master's and a bachelor's and associates, etc. One of the other things we would be doing is also providing some additional points for certification. So if you have the curriculum for fire officer 1, and you're a captain, you have to have the curriculum. You have the curriculum for instructor 1, and you get those certifications. You can get additional points for those. Once again, there's no requirement to get the certifications, but it would seem kind of silly, if you will, to do all the classes and not take the test. Might as well have the certification that goes along with it. That being said, not everyone's inclined to do so, but that would provide yet another way to get a little extra, a little extra movement and separation once again amongst the rank and file. And for the most part, most of these suggestions have come from, like I said, the committee, and then how we have kind of tweaked them and tried to fold them into the existing article and see how they would work with language, and then actually using them in real life scenarios against the existing list, whether it be the driver's list, captain list, go on and so forth. So that's kind of one of those things that hopefully will provide a different look at how education's done, and they will as well. The hope is, I guess, between the education, the acting, and the seniority will give a little more movement and weight to those things where we've kind of lumped in some people all together. Now with the education stuff, as well as the other things, those variables, everything's still mixed into that matrix, so the percentages assigned to each everything will be added up, and then the percentage applied to it. Nothing of that has changed. We've also expanded the acceptable college credit courses to include the nationally accredited institutions that the Florida State Fire College recognizes, which adds 3 more regions. So we'd have the 6 that we currently have, and then there'll be an additional 3 regions that are included as well. I don't have those in front of me, so I'm not going to name them off. So now we have a bit of a more controversial component of the contract, where depending on what side of the fence you fall on, you might either agree or disagree. What the local and the county did agree is that credit registries, credit banks, credit repositories, or any other similar type of repository like those provided through Charter Oaks, Thomas Edison College, Excelsior College, or any other type of college will no longer be deemed as acceptable documentation. Essentially, if you're looking for somewhere who is just hosting and holding credits to show for a specific purpose that is not degree seeking, they're not going to be accepted going forward. So that is probably one of the more controversial components, but we can have an open discussion about that at a later date. One of the things that we've it's not necessarily brought up with the committee, but what we've, from a historical perspective, as a local, looking back, is that when taking a written test, when questions that were maybe determined to be valid or invalid questions, and brought forward by a employee that wanted to challenge that, there was really no method for us to do that. We kind of honed that down, and we have it going through the labor management process, so that will provide an opportunity, if we do find things that are invalid or questions that are bad, to remove those outside of the total percentage missing a particular question in whole. On that note, we have increased that from 50% up to 70%, and those percentages are actually more in line with the acceptable educational standards. The 50% was pretty down on the low end, so we're bringing it up to 70%, which is probably, if you got a bad question, that's where you're going to really find if it's a really bad question. I think one of the examples Derek likes to use is that the question of what day is truck day, which is of course Thursday, was found to be incorrect by 50%, more than 50% of the people. So we had to throw that question out. Is that a bad question? No. Did maybe too many people read into it? I don't know. I don't know why there was more than 50% that didn't know why Thursday was a wrong day, but nonetheless, we're raising that standard to 70%. And one of the final things is the manner in which test scores are going to be calculated. So if a question's thrown out, hopefully we won't have that issue going forward, but if one is thrown out, how the weight of the questions is handled has essentially, depending on which questions you got right or wrong, could actually negatively impact someone who didn't get the question that was thrown out wrong. So, or right, excuse me. Yeah, either way, it essentially negatively impacts. So we have some data to show on that as well. So that will be changed as well. So with all that in mind, those are really the top highlights of the changes with the promotional article. It's a lot, I know. And I know a lot of you, once again, who were at the negotiation session where we discussed this and ultimately agreed to it, probably went out and discussed it, and it's probably been messed up through the telefirefighter hotline. But you know, sometimes those like I said earlier, the facts kind of get twisted up, and before you burn us on the stake, let's take a look at what we have. Maybe a little sweet and sour with this, depending on where, once again, how you fall on the fence. But all that being said, we need to take a progressive movement and stance towards our promotional process and look at how our department has changed in the last 10, 15 years when the original article was brought forward, and see how that, you know, is going to impact us moving forward. And that being said, you know, of course, my goal today was to bring you some solid facts as to what's out there, to give you some food for thought, to create some questions either for the next union meeting or for your executive board member. And you know, just as on that thought, the next business meeting will be on June 12th and 13th, and of course would hope that we see you there. And you know, on a final note, just remember that all of this has to be voted on. Nothing is being forced upon anybody, and you have the ultimate say. So I hope that you did find something useful in this information and from this video today, and I certainly hope to see you at the next meeting. Be safe. Thanks.